good for you.
Hello and welcome to the video. Within this video guide I'm going to take you through the entire process of brewing my very tried and tested American Blonde Ale recipe. So let's get started with the preparation. You will find my full recipe in this video's description as well as a link to the recipe on Brewfather. The first area of preparation is to organise the recipe so that it best emulates mine before you order in your ingredients. This is true of any recipe, but I highlight it so that beginners can get off to a good start too. Starting with the grain, you're going to need to find the closest types available from your chosen homebrew store to match the final colour as well as the predicted gravity. This may mean that your grain bill will look a little bit different to mine, but as long as you are close in the potential gravity, which will end up as alcohol, then all will be good. This is simply because the secret to great beer is balance, and alcohol is the first part of this equation. To balance the alcohol, we will be using hops. You will note that the recipe shared in this video's description shows hops as simply IBU values. This is due to the fact that it is highly likely that the alpha acid percentage of my hops will be very different to yours, so the weights of each addition that you use will need to be different to mine. So using Brewfather or your brewing software of choice, adjust the hops to the IBU levels required using your own hops alpha acid percentage. If you do not follow these steps for this recipe, then it will not be the recipe as intended. We have now come to the final preparation stage, which is in respect of your water profile. Personally, I recommend that you use the hoppy profile found in Brewfather as shown on screen to the left here, but the balanced profile shown on the right will suit those that are looking for something that gives no preference to the hops or the grain for balance. If you are new to homebrew, then you will be forgiven for skipping this part, but keep it in mind for the future, as water profiling to style can offer your end results a very satisfying boost. It is very easy to set up in Brewfather also if you read the documentation. It is now brew day and time to add the grain. I strongly suggest that you do this gradually, stirring as you go. Whilst this takes a little longer, it will set you off on a very strong path for the entire brew, allowing you to obtain the true potential from your grain. After all, you have paid for all of your grain, so I would urge you to use it fully. Certainly your recipe software assumes that you will do. This single piece of advice has helped a large number of brewers over the years that I've been producing YouTube content, so if you are new to my channel, I hope that this will help you also, if it is something new for you. Let's now start our mash. Shown on screen are the steps for this recipe. You will note that the mashing temperature is a little higher than the usual 65 degrees Celsius or 149 degrees Fahrenheit mash-in step seen in most brewing recipes, and this serves to make this beer a little less dry, which is really best for this style. Let's now take a look at the recipe vitals and grain. Here we have an estimated ABV of 5.1% with an IBU of 23, which gives us a bittering units to gravity units ratio of 0.47, which is nicely between bitter and sweet. So as you can see straight away, this is a very easy drinking beer. Moving on to the fermentables, we have a base malt of pale ale at 93%, which is acting as our canvas for flavour. Adding in a little of this flavour is our wheat at 5%, which will also give a little extra texture, body and head retention. This is backed up a little further in these regards by the crystal malt, which will also add in a little colour, making this one suitable to be called a blonde. This is a very simple grain bill, but this works extremely well for this style. After the mash, I spalged by hand, ensuring that the spalge water did not go much higher than you see here, and that the area was covered as evenly as possible. This ensures that the grain is rinsed of sugar optimally. However, the most important thing about brewing is to obtain consistent results, so that through accurate prediction you can be true to your recipe. As you heat up to the boil, this foam forms on top, which consists of proteins, which is known as the hop break. Personally, I skim this to allow it to drop, but others like to remove it. In order to form an opinion about which way to go here, I suggest that you try both methods with different types of beer and see what works best for you. The taste of others is not at all relevant when it comes to your beer. The points of consideration here are flavour and clarity. For some, there will be no difference in flavour either way. In terms of clarity, this is something that can be addressed by other means, though with some beer styles this will not be desirable or required. Let's now look at the boil, with details now shown on the right hand side of the screen. Personally, I favour a 30-minute boil for this recipe, which involves using a little more bittering hops at the start, but because you are boiling flavour off for half the time, you will enjoy the elements of the Chinook hops used here more. When using Chinook, this consists of pine flavours and aromas along with some spice and a mild fruitiness which is mostly citrus. Naturally, you could boil for 60 minutes and adjust the hops to the same IBU as mine, but this would result in a flavour and aroma loss in the background that I believe makes this recipe better. When adding in your hops, give them a good stir in to allow the vegetable matter to drop to the bottom of your brewing system and the hop oils to also drop and amalgamate with your wort. With this recipe you will note further hop additions at both 15 and 5 minutes in the form of Amarillo and Citra. These pair very well and offer a strong element of citrus with elements of grapefruit, lime and tropical fruit. These flavours are more subtle within this beer style compared to an IPA, but they are certainly very present with an American blonde ale. When it comes to chilling this wort, I am using a counterflow chiller, so during the boil stage I ran boiling hot wort through it to sanitize it. The use of a counterflow chiller is ideal for this brew because there is no hop stand addition, but that's not to say that you can't use any other type of chiller, because obviously you can. Once the boil was over, I turned off the heat and used cold water within my counterflow chiller to drop temperatures down. This starts with recirculating back into the brewing system as you see here, whilst keeping an eye on temperature. To do this I use the Grainfather water meter as shown here because it pairs very nicely with their counterflow chiller and allows me to monitor the temperature of the wort being cooled. Once this temperature drops down to close to our yeast pitching temperature, then it is time to start filling our fermenter. To begin with, this needs to adjust and can move upwards as seen here, but after a short period this will start coming down very quickly. It was then time to transfer to my fermenter and pitch my yeast. My yeast of choice for this brew is BRY97 American West Coast Ale. If you cannot obtain this, then other American yeast such as Fermentis US05 or MJ-M44 will also do the job nicely. You will note in my recipe shared in this video's description that I suggest a starting temperature of 20 degrees Celsius with BRY97, which is then ramped up to 22 Celsius after 7 days over a 2-day period. See on screen for imperial measurements and also realise that this is intended just for standard fermentations. However, for this fermentation I'm going to use pressure, and I'm going to use one of Kegland's Kegmenters for this task. The reason for this is that I have no need for the flavour contribution from yeast, and keeping it clean will aid in the crispness of the end beer. My method here is to let the pressure raise naturally to 12 psi and ferment at a constant 25 degrees C, which is the equivalent of 77 degrees Fahrenheit. If you have the option, then I would very much recommend pressure fermentation for this style in general for a more pleasing result. This recipe also has a dry hop. Personally, I favour using stainless steel containers for dry hopping for their weight, which allows them to drop down quickly, and the ease of cleaning and sanitising them. These are tea strainers, if you didn't notice, that can be purchased very cheaply. Be sure to never fill these past the halfway mark to allow for expansion. This way you'll always obtain the oil from all of your hops. When handling these, be very sure that your hands are both clean and sanitary to avoid potential contamination. If, like me, you are fermenting under pressure for this one, then remove all pressure using the pressure release valve first, before removing the lid. Then, with cleanliness and sanitation in mind, add your dry hops into your vessel, allowing them to drop. You may think that I'm overstating cleanliness and sanitisation here, but it is known as a leading factor in homebrew spoilage, so I think it is worth highlighting. An ideal time to add your dry hops is when your specific gravity is between 5 to 10 points away from your predicted final gravity. The ideal contact time for your dry hops is between 2 to 3 days, but you can leave them for up to 5 days without any concern at all. Let's give the final beer a pour, and I will then take you through the tasting notes. This beer was transferred under pressure from the kegmenter into a keg and was not cold crashed, nor were any fining agents used. At the point you see it at now, this beer has been in the keg for 3 weeks at an average of 5 degrees Celsius or 41 degrees Fahrenheit, with a pressure setting of 15 psi, which is just over 1 bar. This level of pressure has been used for both carbonation and serving. This is more carbonation than I give most styles, but I find it enhances the drinking experience for this one. Let's now move on to my tasting notes. In terms of aroma, this beer has a very fresh and light citrus aroma to it, with some background pine and malt sweetness. In terms of flavour, this is very well balanced between malt and hops, and has a little extra malty sweetness. It is a very smooth drinking beer with an easy level of bitterness. The hop flavour is citrus mostly, and is very refreshing with a background element of tropical fruit and spice, which make for interesting extra dimensions to this style of beer. I note that this is certainly a very easy drinking beer that is ideal as a thirst quencher. I find that this recipe's version pairs well with a wider range of food than a regular blonde ale. I found this to be a popular beer for summer drinking with a wide range of drinkers. My final impression is that this is a very balanced, easy drinking beer that is popular to take a few pints of before moving on to something else. So there you have it. Do let me know in the comments section what you think of this video, and if you brew this, what you think of the beer. I do hope that you found this video useful, informative and interesting. If so, why not consider liking and subscribing? For further support you can join the channel's Facebook group, and if you would like to support the channel then check out the channel's merchandise store, as all profits go back into the channel. Until next time, happy brewing!